Hello and welcome to another edition of Model Aviation Live. I want to welcome you to our first episode that we're going to actually have two guests, so I'm really excited about that. I also want to say happy Friday to you. I've got a couple of things I want to share with you before I bring our guests on. Firstly, the first thing I want to share is about the Axial X SCX10 Jeep. I actually had the opportunity to review this product, which I know you're thinking it's not an airplane, or a helicopter or a drone, so why would I review it? And the reason being is because now AMA, through the Park Pilot membership, now includes cars and boats with your insurance. So whereas the regular membership, AMA membership, had always included cars and boats, the membership for Park Pilot members now also includes cars and boats. So as part of that, to announce that in the next Park Pilot, which is the fall edition of Park Pilot, I did a review of the Axial SCX10 3 Jeep, which you can see on the screen now. It's basically a rock crawler and trail truck, and so I was really excited to get the opportunity to do that. It looks really, really scale, and it's a different experience. It drives at about a walking pace, so it's more about driving over obstacles and kind of doing the trail truck thing. So I took it to my local park. I took it out to locally here. We have a reservoir. So I'm excited to share that with you, that you can look forward to that review in the fall Park Pilot. And if you're a Park Pilot member, cars and boats are now covered with your insurance. The other thing I want to mention to you is Rtl Fasteners. So in the September issue of Model Aviation, in the Worth a Closer Look section, I did a review of the metric assortment of Rtl Fasteners. So screws, nuts, bolts, washers, that kind of thing. And they were kind enough, Rtl Fasteners was kind enough to give us a code to allow our members to get 30% off if you purchase the metric assortment, which is what I reviewed, or the Master Builder assortment, which is SAE hardware. So if you take a look in the September issue, in the Worth a Closer Look, you'll see the review that I did on the metric assortment. In the October issue, that's out now digitally and will be out shortly in print, the Common Questions feature is on Rtl Fasteners, and it'll give you more information. It also gives you the code to give you 30% off. And then beyond that, when the November issue comes out, I also did another review in Worth a Closer Look, but this time it was on the Master Builder assortment, and you can get the code there as well. So when you're thinking about building, it's obviously important to have the right hardware, and these assortments were really helpful to have all the parts that you need if in case you lose a screw or something's missing from the model that you're working on. So definitely take a look at those and take advantage of that 30% off if you need additional hardware. Also, since we're going to be talking about building around the October issue, that's, as I said, out on digital and will soon be out on print, I wanted to share with you a story that I read yesterday. So our hobby, Model Aviation, is doing quite well. When I talk to manufacturers, distributors, advertisers, they're really doing good business, like what they tell me, Christmas level sales. So it turns out, I guess because people are spending maybe a little bit more time at home right now, that it's not just our hobby that's doing well. So I read an article yesterday that said that Fender guitars is having a record selling year this year. Will break any year ever. And Fender came about 10 years after AMA. So AMA started in 1936. Fender started in 1946. And from 1946 to 2020, this year will be the best year for musical instruments for them. And I'm sure that's probably the case for other musical instrument makers. And I personally actually purchased a Fender precision bass this year. So it was interesting in that regard too. So if you look right now on your screen, that is my actual bass that I bought from Sweetwater in Fort Wayne, about an hour north of Muncie. And so I did my small part to, I guess, help that business, but I play bass. And we did an article a few years ago about musicians who are modelers, and I'm a bass player. So I thought it'd be interesting to just kind of mention that not only is our hobby doing well, but other hobbies are really thriving, it seems, as we have more time at home. So the last thing I want to talk to you about before I bring our guests on is, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm actually wearing an AMA Plan Service t-shirt. And the reason I'm wearing that is because I'm really excited to tell you that starting September 15th through October 31st is the plan sale. So right now, AMA members can take 20% off any plan from the AMA Plan Service. Beyond that, we also have a brand new plans website. So more information is available now on our website as far as you can view the plans, you can see pictures of the aircraft where available. There's a lot more information on the plan site than what you've seen in the past. And so you would definitely want to check that out. But beyond just checking out our new website, you can get 20% off. So no matter what, beyond the October issue, we'll have some build features in there and we'll have digital plans. But, if there's something else that you've been eyeing, you can get that at our plan service and you can get 20% off your entire order. So definitely check that out. So as I said, I'm really excited today for the first time in the history of Model Aviation Live, I'm going to have two guests. So I'm really excited about that. And I guess I'm crazy enough in that the two guests, their first names are both Mark. So wish me luck. I'm going to do my best to, not confuse things by having two Marks on the show. But since this episode is supporting the October issue, the build issue, we're also supporting Build Month in the month of October. So I wanted to have, two kit manufacturers on the show. And it kind of made sense, since we're talking about the October issue, to have Mark Freeland from Rtl RC and Mark Lanterman from Old School Model Works, because in the October issue, we did a review on a product from each of them. So welcome to both Marks.
Hi, Jay. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to chat with you a bit and to try to keep things from being confusing about which Mark. I'll call you Retro Mark and Old School Mark, just to try to keep things a little more simple. So I see Jerry Yarish is on with us. Appreciate Jerry joining us. If you don't know, Jerry Yarish is the technical editor of Model Airplane News and a good friend of AMA and the magazine. So Jerry, happy to see you on. Real quick in the comments too, we've got Doyle Blevins. He says he plays bass, so that's awesome. As I said, we did do an article previously about modelers that are also playing musical instruments. So if we ever do a follow-up on that, I'll have to remember that, Doyle. So I've got some questions, and excuse me if I look slightly off camera. My laptop's right here. So I've got some questions that I wrote this morning to ask both of you. So firstly, for those that might not be familiar with your companies, can you share a little bit about your companies and also about your modeling background? So Retro Mark, we'll let you go first.
Okay, well, modeling background. I started building flying models when I was 11 years old. Haven't stopped since. Great hobby, something that I've always enjoyed, gave me a lot of satisfaction. And after I retired from Ford Motor Company, I decided to open up a small business and see if I can give something back to the hobby. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I started Rtl RC 2008. So we've now been in production for 12 years, roughly, nearly 13. Do a lot of radio control and a lot of pre-flight. Started off, my company was doing 80% radio control and 20% pre-flight. But since I acquired Campbell's Custom Kits about 4.5 years ago, it switched to more like 80% pre-flight and 20% radio control. But they're still both important to me.
And Mark, Lanterman?
Well, I've been in the hobby forever, it seems like. I built my first airplane at the age of 5, and my dad was part of the hobby. He was vice president of World Engines, so I kind of grew up in the hobby, and I've been involved with the hobby in one way, shape, or form for the majority of my life. A little brief part of it, I was not involved. I was in the print industry, and photography and that sort of stuff, but I came back into the hobby, and about 3 years ago or so, split away from what I was doing, and I was planning on doing some kit cutting anyway, but as it turned out, it was a good time to ramp up on that, and I've been doing it since. We've not been in business that long, like I say, about 3 years or so, but since then, I've been bringing out about 3 or 4 kits a year, and it's been steadily growing since then, so very happy with it.
Thanks for that insight. While you were sharing your stories, I looked at the comments real quick, and I see that Alpha from Motion RC has also joined us. and he said the AMA Plans website is hugely valuable resource. So Alpha is likely joining us from China. So he handles a lot of the development of motion RC aircraft. So Alpha, thank you so much for being with us. So let me ask another question of both of you. So you both have several releases that you've put out with your companies. Obviously, Rtl RC has put out more because the company's been around longer. But how do you decide on what models to release? What do you think about? Is it customer feedback? I know that Mark Freeland from Rtl RC, I know sometimes you release planes that have been designed previously. So this time we'll let Mark Lanterman go first and tell us a little bit about how you determine what models to bring to the market.
Well, the first one that I did was the Robin Hood 25, and that was done because of my relation with World Engines. It was easy to do. I had the rights to do it. Actually, many of you don't know, but Mark Freeland also helped me when I was getting started. I didn't have a laser cutter, but he helped me learn the ins and outs of things and actually cut the first couple prototypes for me and kind of got me on the right path, so to speak. So many thanks to him, as he already knows. But since that point, I've been just trying to fill different directions. Let me start out by saying when I started doing this, I was in the scale. I did competition scale for decades. And I kind of got disillusioned with it. And I wanted just to go out and build an airplane that was for fun. Something I could make, green with orange spots or something if I wanted. Nobody would care. And I couldn't find a lot that were out there. There was some stuff from SIG and a few others, but nothing that really did something for me. So I decided to try this. So I went with the Robin first. It started to work. So that was a high wing. Said, okay, now I need a low wing. So I did the Sky Ranger, and then I just went in different directions. And I'm trying to fill different niches. I've got a Delta wing, and I've got a glider, and I've got sport airplanes and big scale, small, all that sort of stuff. We're releasing a new biplane, which you'll see in the October issue in my ad in there, and you'll see it on our website as well. So I'm just trying to fill different niches and go in different directions and try to get a little bit of something for everyone. That's kind of how I do things. How I find the kits, to be honest, a lot of it, I'm looking through old issues of magazines and finding these cool plans and bringing them back. Hang on. Excuse me. Bringing them back. I redesign them a bit. Sometimes I change the size and modernize them, and it's worked out well.
All right. Well, let's hear a little bit more about how Rtl RC comes up with the models you release, Mark.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's start off with a story, if you don't mind.
Sure.
My very first kit that I came out with was the E-Model. And I'm sure Jay will add something to this story later. But anyway, how that came about was a friend who's also my divorce attorney said, well, you've got nothing to do with your time now that you've retired from Ford. Why don't you design me an airplane? And I said, okay, let's talk about the specifications. So he said, I want something that will fly a bit like a Lazy Bee, but something I can like throw in the car and hide from the wife and take with me anywhere I'm going. So I came up with this very low aspect ratio airplane. It has a 3-to-1 aspect ratio. The wings come off. It's only a 32-inch wingspan, but it's 360 square inches of wing area. Weighs about a pound, which is extremely lightly wing loaded. And you can put 2 of them in the suitcase when you take the wings and the tailplane off. You can put them together in less than 5 minutes. So he was very pleased with it. The first prototype only lasted 1 flight. I learned a lot from that. Second prototype, I still have the airplane, although I don't fly it anymore. It is over 500 flights on it and at least 250 hours of airtime. And the wood's kind of getting a little bit crunchy and soft now. So, but anyway, it's that was the very first airplane. I took it to AMA to see if I could get their approval to use the Park Pilot logo in my advertising. And Jay happened to be there. He wasn't editor of Model Aviation at that time, but he happened to be in the meeting. And you want to take it from there, Jay, on that one?
Well, yeah. So at that time, Michael Ramsey was the editor and I was the assistant editor, and we got called up to the lobby because someone was here to see us. And So that was the first time I met Mark, and he had a suitcase, on the floor next to him. And I thought, oh, he must have just come in from out of town and he hasn't had a chance to check in his hotel, but I was thinking, well, I wonder why he brought a suitcase in the building, and it was kind of a older suitcase too, not the more modern ones with the wheels, but, kind of a retro suitcase, but that I didn't know about Retro RC at the time. And so I think either one of us asked, well, what do you have in your suitcase? And Mark said, oh, I've got a couple of airplanes in here. And we're thinking, a couple of airplanes? Are they micro? I mean, I would think it would be hard enough to fit one airplane in a suitcase. So you open up the suitcase and you showed us the airplanes and you talked to us about it. And that was really exciting. And then at that point, you asked us if we wanted to go fly them. And I remember it was somewhat gusty that day. And Michael flew it first, and then I flew it after that. And we both really enjoyed the experience. And fortunately, we gave it back to you in one piece, even though it was gusty. And so, that's pretty much my thoughts about the first time. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, you went over and visited the museum because you'd never actually visited AMA. Is that right?
That's correct. That was my very first introduction to the museum. And I spent way too much time for my wife's liking in the library looking at old magazines, Mark. So, yeah. In fact, Michael Ramsey was flying this thing backwards. It was that windy. It was 15 gusting 20, and it's got a stall speed of about 10 miles an hour. So anyway, that was my first airplane. After that, I started to get involved with schools and school projects, and designed a couple of airplanes based on old designs. Like one of them was based on the Phantom Flash from Comet 1937 kit, and I scaled it up to 1.5 times the original size and made something that was a lot easier for young kids like 11-year-olds to handle. And for several years, I would go once a year and run a class for about 12 weeks. And each kid would get to make 2 or 3 different airplanes, but the big project would be something like the 24-inch wingspan Phantom Flash. Did another one, which was a flying wing, which kind of looked Star Wars-ish if you covered it with silver tissue and made a black fuselage. Then I also did a derivative of Sinbad the Sailor, which had a flat fuselage, but the regular Sinbad wings, 3-foot wingspan. And after that, I started doing things that were more unusual. For example, this guy, which is a flying saucer, which was, most people thought, including me, would be very difficult to fly. It was actually a takeoff from a control line aircraft that was designed back in the 50s. And I decided to see if I could make a radio control version of the same thing and make it fly. First flight, I had a gyro 3-axis gyro stabilizer in it. And I found it was so easy to fly that eventually I detuned it to like 0 gain on all 3 channels. Jay's also flown it, and I think he'll testify to how easy it was to fly.
Yeah, yes, it flew so much better than, I don't know what I expected. It was, I remember there at one point there was like a foam flying pizza that was a thing for a little while, and and the Saucerus, I wasn't sure what to expect, but it flew great. And I have to say that I'm fortunate because Mark lives in Michigan and he usually comes every year to the Nats. And when he comes to the Nats, he's like, "Hey, I got this new airplane. You want to fly it?" So I've flown just about every one of Mark's airplanes. And since we're doing a little bit of show and tell here, I actually have an airplane right here from it's called the Camp Racer that Mark has produced. And I want to mention, so Mark Freeland from Rtl RC, he's done a great job of doing outreach to kids and going in and teaching school groups. And I knew this, and I knew that he was coming to the Nats. So I asked Mark if he would actually teach AMA employees how to build this very airplane and teach them a little bit about free flight, because, not everybody that works at AMA is a modeler. And I thought it was a project that anyone could tackle, with Mark's help. And so this actual airplane came out of that. When we went into the upstairs conference room, and I think about 12 to 15 AMA employees joined in on building this model. And maybe maybe now would be a great time to make mention of, because of all your work in the hobby, Mark, and all your outreach, you're actually in the AMA Hall of Fame.
Well, I was very surprised whenever I was given that honor, but yes, I am, and thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the support from my customers that kind of got me there. Another thing I might mention is since I started, as of the end of last year, I've manufactured over 10,000 model airplane kits, plus a lot of other ancillary bits and pieces like toolboxes and building jigs and glue caddies and a variety of other things.
Well, congratulations on that milestone.
Sorry?
I said congratulations on that milestone.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure Mark, won't be too many years before you get there too.
I'm trying to catch up to you.
I do have a head start. Now we look for unusual subjects. They're either things that I've designed myself or scale models or my favorite airplanes, and usually something unusual that most people haven't seen. This is one example. Eastbourne Monoplane, which is a 1913 vintage airplane, which looks like it'd be really difficult to fly because it has zero dihedral. It's a great little electric indoor RC airplane. You can fly it outdoors, but it was designed intentionally for indoor flying. And it was something that just really appealed to me, the vintage look of it, the engine out front, which I ended up doing a scale dummy engine to hide the electric motor, and also to give it some nose weight because it's got a very short moment. And it's turned out to be a very successful little airplane. Mark Lanterman flew one of the early prototypes, which he built himself. I think it was the second one built. Do a lot of free flight stuff, like this is a hand-launched glider from the 30s, designed by Joe Herbat. And this particular build, I've RC'd. It's got a little brick receiver in it and rather an elevator. And it's a great hand-launched glider. And the most recent one, or one of the most recent ones, is a 1951 flying wing, which is kind of large to go on your screen. I'll try and get most of it in the screen, which is reviewed in the October build issue, built by Terry Dunn. So anyway, this was one of the unusual subjects that I found in air trails. It was the subject was actually the winning design from a 1951 design contest to design a flying wing with a flat bottomed airfoil. In other words, not a reflexed trailing edge. So anyway, this was the winning design. They published the design. They built 2 prototypes. The prize for the contest was the winner got the build that was done by the experts at Air Trails. They had to build a second one because the first one flew away. It was a free flight model. Anyway, it was, I thought, a beautiful airplane and something that I just had to do. So that's kind of how I pick my designs.
So there was a question in the comments on whether the wings fold on this, and they do. Do you want to explain that really quick?
It's not exactly the best catapult launch glider, partly because of the variability of the wing folding, but the idea was to reproduce something that was done many years ago. I think it was originally done by Comet, where they had a little jet cat that had a folding wing. It was kind of just a personal challenge to see if I could come up with a mechanism for a folding wing that was better than that, basically, and a bit more repeatable. And like Jay said, I threw it together for a little teaching session at AMA, and it was actually attended by, I think, maybe 5 guys, and the rest of the participants were ladies. And I have to say that the color schemes that the ladies came up with were much more interesting than the guys. Lots of pink polka dots and various things like that. But anyway, that was actually a great experience. We spent about 4 hours in the workshop, and then a couple of hours outdoors after hours when everybody got to fly them and trim them out.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you doing that. So you did kind of bring it back a little bit to the October issue. So I want to talk a little bit about specifically about the Javelin and the Flying Wing. So I'll start with you, Mark Lanterman. So tell us about how the Javelin came about and what were your goals when you designed the aircraft?
Okay. Before I answer that question, I'm going to show one more thing from Show and Tell. Mark was mentioning his Eastbourne Monoplane, and I can verify how well that flew because I had the second prototype, and as I was lucky enough to earn the champion that year at eFest, 2014 it was. So it's a fair amount of parts, but it goes together well and it does fly well. So anyway, back to the Javelin. The Javelin is my, I don't know, 6th, 7th design, something like that. And I was wanting something that was just an all-around sport airplane. To kind of liken it to something sort of like an ugly stick is like an all-around flyer. It doesn't do everything great, but it does a whole lot of stuff. Something that you can just, anybody can build and fly and beat to death at the field. And I didn't want to do a stick because sticks have been done 7 billion times. So I was looking around trying to find other stuff, and I couldn't really find anything to base it off of, so I just decided to make it my own. The Javelin is the first old school model kit that is original to me. I took bits and pieces of different things. The wing is inspired by an old pattern design. It has an airfoil that I was able to find that actually works extremely well. I don't remember the name of it off my top of my head, but it's an actual NACA airfoil. The wing tips and the tail surfaces are all an interesting new rounded look, kind of like a Cessna 190-ish sort of a look. And I put it together in this fuselage that's a little bit bigger and a little wider than average. That way you can put basically whatever you want to put in it. It'll fly in a 3S pack, it'll fly in a 4S pack, glow, gas, electric, whatever you want to do. And as it turned out, when I put it all together and I flew the first prototype, I was stunned at how good it flew. It really did everything I wanted to do. And it's a lot of fun. The ones that I fly the most on is on a 4S pack. It'll go absolutely vertical off of takeoff with that. Rolls, loops, anything you want to do. Inverted flight, low passes, really a show-off sort of a plane. And if you put in some flaperons, if you have separate servos on the ailerons, if you dial in flaperons with that, you can slow it down to almost a walking pace if you like. So for really slow passes or spot landings, it works very good on. So yeah, that's a little bit about the Javelin. I'm very pleased with the way it turned out.
Well, Retro Mark, when we talk about your aircraft that was reviewed in the October issue, it's called the 1951 Flying Wing. So I'm guessing the 1951 part kind of gives it away a little bit, but tell us a little bit about the inspiration on that one.
Well, like I said, it was the plan was published in, I think it was July 51, Air Trails, and it was the results of a competition that they had announced a year earlier. You had a year basically to submit a design that met the criterion that they had published, and the experts at the magazine would pick what they thought was the most likely one to be successful, build a prototype, fly it, and then award the final prototype to the designer. Well, they built the first one and they lost it on its maiden flight, which amazed them. So they had to build a second prototype. And the one unfortunate thing they didn't do is they didn't publish the name of the designer. They published the plan. The plan does not have the designer's name on it. It's not mentioned in the article, and nobody seems to know who designed it. So I'd like to offer an award or a prize. If anybody can come up with proof of who designed it and some evidence to support that, I would award a kit for the Flying Wing to the person that came up with that answer. So, but anyway, it's a beautiful flyer, very slow, very sedate, looks gorgeous in the air. It's not an aerobatic airplane. It's a a relaxing Sunday afternoon flyer. And I think Terry's article will attest to that. Terry looks like he was thrilled with it after his first flight. I think he took his photograph, or his friend took the photograph the day he took it out for its maiden.
Yes. Yes, he's definitely not the designer, but he was thrilled to fly it, as you can see in that picture.
Yeah.
And
so I'd like to add a little bit to that. Prior to doing the actual 1951 design, which I'd already had in my head to do, one of our local hobby stores, Flightline Hobbies, John Hoover is the proprietor, runs a annual winter building project of some sort to try and encourage people to build. And that particular year, he had come up with an idea of providing a set of wing ribs and asking people if they would build something of their own imagination using all of the ribs as supplied without modifying them. They could add whatever they liked. They could make a fuselage, whatever shape they wanted, etc., etc. And he got a lot of very interesting aircraft, like X-form wings. He had one that was a swing wing airplane, was submitted and flown. And fortunately, as I was the person that was providing the wing rib kits for these builders, I felt obliged to do something with them myself. I had 2 weeks after the Toledo show to put something together for his competition, and I ended up basically bodging the design of the 51 flying wing to fit the ribs, and built a 60-inch wingspan airplane, which to all intents and purposes looks identical to the flying wing. It just has different ribs, different structure, but flew really well. And after its success in flying, I decided that I definitely had to do the original design, which is the kit that's currently available. Anyway, Jay has flown, I believe, or at least seen flying, the original 60-inch wingspan version that I put together. I had it down at Muncie that summer.
yeah, I believe I did fly it. So part of the October issue, I mean, it's all about building, of course. We want to promote building. We want to support building. And, so a lot of times that's for people that are builders, but it's also for people that might be interested in building. Maybe someone's recently gotten into the hobby, and maybe their first experience was with an ARF or ready to fly, and they're ready to they want to take on the challenge to, have the pride of building something, by hand that becomes a flying model. So for the people that are in that category, beginner builder category, I would be curious to hear from both of you, since I'm sure you answer a lot of questions from your customers. Any tips or tricks or thoughts you have to share with viewers about, first time building and maybe something they need to know. So I'll start with you, Mark Lanterman.
Well, I'd say the first thing is you should be comfortable enough with the ARF that you have that you're able to fly it comfortably, maybe even without the stabilization. If you can do that, then you're ready to step up into different airplanes and start possibly building your own. I will admit, building your own, maybe not for everyone, but I think everybody should try it at least once. You just might like it, actually. And you can actually make a plane that's your own. It's not the same as every other one that's at the field. Your own color scheme, you can modify it, change a wingspan, different, whatever. Wings on the top, bottom, all that sort of stuff. As to how to start out, I would say don't start off too ambitiously. Your first airplane to build should not be a P-51. It should not be an F-18 or something that's really eye-catching. To be honest, your first build should be kind of boring. It should be something simple, a few amount of pieces, something that's going to fly fairly good, so it'll help you in trimming and flying, and you're not overwhelmed with a lot of stuff that you have to do with the more advanced airplanes. Some of the sheeting techniques involved with like a P-51 with compound curves, that's hard for even advanced modelers to get right. And something simple with slab sides, simple ribs, that sort of construction is pretty easy. You're going to have a lot more success with that. So start off with something like that. In my case, I've got one called the Mambo. We've got some gliders and that sort of stuff that helps out. I'm sure that Mark also has similar airplanes that are simple to start with. And the other thing I would put into that is, if you have a club or a hobby shop, try to involve them with questions that you may have. The internet is great for some things, but there's nothing like being one-on-one with someone. who can give you some guidance. Clubs normally have club builds during the winter. There's certainly people in the clubs that have built before that can give you tips. Bring a part to the field if you don't understand. Maybe they can help you right there in a spot, or invite them over for dinner, and maybe the two of you can work it out in your workshop. But getting help from others is a good point as well.
Okay, Retro Mark, what tips do you have for new builders?
I'd certainly agree with many of the things Mark has said, but very specifically, talk to people face to face. Ask them for their advice on what they've built that's been successful for them and what difficulties they had. Like Mark said, don't pick anything that's too ambitious. For example, the Eastbourne Monoplane that I showed earlier, I would not recommend that for a beginner. You need to be an expert builder and an expert pilot for that one. I would recommend something if you're going for a radio control airplane that's really simple, like this thing here, which is a Campy Racer. It's designed to take the radio control from one of the Foamies, which maybe you've already been flying, and the motor and gearbox from the Foamy, and its profile takes about 4 or 5 hours to build. Comes with options and pre-colored color schemes. This particular one is a one-off that I did for Christmas. It's the Christmas eraser, but most of them are a variety of different colors that people find appealing. The reds, yellows, blues, oranges. Anyway, it's something that is easy to fly. It's only 3-channel. It's rudder, elevator, and throttle. And just about anybody can fly this, like right off the board, almost. If you're going for a free flight model, then maybe this might seem a bit silly, but Skybird is a little airplane that's designed to look like a bird. You can get quite adventurous in how you decorate it. This one's been decorated with Sharpies. And in actual fact, is a great model for kids to start with. Girls really like it because the feather pattern's pre-printed, and they can color them in with Sharpies and get very creative. Or another one, this is another old design. This is the Vartanian, comes in 2 different flavors, a hand launch version and a catapult launch version. This one happens to be catapult launch. There's a hook here and a tab at the back with some sandpaper on it that you can hold on to it. But this is the sort of airplane that you need to put a thermalizer on, although it looks very simple. They fly away regularly. So this one has a little tab on the side that whenever the fuse burns through, comes out. It's hard to see, but you can see it kind of comes out there, spoils the airflow and causes the airplane to start stalling, and hopefully brings it down out of the thermal that it might be caught in. But this is a very simple, $18 airplane that just about anybody can build and have success with. So that'd be a good place to start. If you have a little bit of building experience, then you might think about a larger glider. This is a thing called the Lulu, which is back from the 40s, British design that many people are familiar with. That's the wing, fuselage, but it's all very simple, easy construction. The sort of thing that just about anybody that's got a little bit of building experience could build, and can fly from a high start or from a tow line. But don't get too adventurous with your first couple of airplanes. Start easy. Start with something that is appealing to you, but is not going to over challenge your building skills until you've got some under your belt.
Well, I think that's really excellent advice. And I want to ask you both now a little bit about tools, the tools of the trade, if you will. So I think most people would think, when you think building, you might think X-Acto knife or covering iron, heat gun, those kind of things. But I'd be interested to hear from both of you, maybe some other tools that you find helpful in building models that may not commonly be thought of as building tools. So Mark Lanterman, I'll start with you.
Well, most of the tools that I use are pretty common, to be honest. The ones that you mentioned there's obviously the Dremel tool or rotary tool, if you don't want to use the trade name, drill presses and that sort of stuff. But straight edges, angles like 90 degrees, 45 degrees, like a 1-2-3 block, for instance. It's not only a good measuring tool, but it's a good weight to hold down things when you need to. Simple things like pens and pencils. You need a bunch of those and T-pins. Wax paper. And the biggest thing probably most people argue over is glue, as to what to do with glue. Do you want to build old school and use something even as smelly as Ambroid, or the old style white glues? I have some friends which use those to great effect. I'm a CA guy myself. I use a lot of CA, and of course there's epoxy, but they all have their place. You have to make sure you use them in the right amounts and make sure you mix them correctly for them to be effective. Other than that, the biggest tool I could actually tell you is patience. It's not something you can buy. It's something that you have to work at. Don't try to do too much too fast. And I'm sure Mark Freeland will agree with this. I'm sure any kit manufacturer is going to agree with this. Read the instructions. We write them for a reason. We put them in for a reason. We may not know everything, but we know why something is done in this particular instance. You may differ from them a little bit, but please read the instructions. It can help a whole lot. That would be probably my biggest tip.
Well, Retromark, I think one of the things that you might mention is maybe a building board or Bill's fingers, but I don't want to take away from what you're going to say. So tell us what you use outside of maybe the most common building tools.
Okay, well, my favorite building tool of all, I actually used to market as a modeler's best friend. Costs $1.50, and you can either buy them from me, or you can go to Sally's Beauty Salon and buy them there. It's the little double-sided nail files that come with 100 grit on one side and 180 grit on the other side, washable sandpaper that's already glued to a stick. I use them every day, maybe 4 or 5 sitting on my building board at any one time. Some are a little dull, so they're more like 300 grit instead of 180 grit. But that is the most useful tool of all, is a sanding block, basically. Don't be afraid to sand. Sand, sand, sand. It's what makes a model beautiful. It makes it fly well, makes it smooth, makes parts fit if they didn't fit, but most laser cut parts really do fit very well. So that would be my favorite tool that I should tell everybody they should go out and get half a dozen of right now. And they're cheap. Other thing is a good selection of needle files, and also a good selection of pliers, particularly round nose pliers like these guys are great for bending wire, making hooks, rear hooks, front hooks for free flight model airplanes. But get ones that have got really strong points that are not too long, otherwise they'll bend whenever you're gripping the wire. So I guess those are my favorite tools.
So you're not going to mention Bill's fingers?
Of course.
You're not going to mention Bill? Isn't it Bill's fingers that you sell?
Well, yeah, I have a lot of building jigs, and Bill's fingers are actually my most popular product. I didn't think to mention them because everybody knows about them, I think. Basically, I don't have one with me right here, but it's a little piece of plywood that has a sprung finger on it, and it takes 2 magnets. You use it on a magnetic building board, and it just very gently clamps down a piece of lightweight 16 square balsa or 3/32 square balsa in location without putting any pins through it or putting any pins either side of it. It doesn't crush the wood. And the reason why it's called Bill's Fingers is it's named after a dear friend, Bill Brown, who I gave a set of my early magnetic building jigs to and asked him to evaluate them. And he said, well, you've got just about everything covered except for holding a piece, and he put his finger down on the table like this, holding a piece of 16th wood down without crushing it. So I said, just hold your finger there while I take a photograph to remind me to design something to do that. And that's how I got the name Bill's Fingers. Bill is now in his high 90s, still building, still flying, and great guy. There's another one called Bill's Thumbs also, which will hold 1/4 inch or or bigger wood to the magnetic board in a similar fashion. His thumb kind of like holding that. So anyway, building jigs, have a look at my website. You'll see a whole variety of them. I spend as much time cutting plywood as I do balsa wood, believe it or not. They're all made out of white birch ply.
So we talked about the importance of reading the manuals, reading the instructions. I mean, obviously, as you said, Mark Lanterman, that's very important to do that. And it, obviously it makes sense. So I'm assuming, I believe that both of you write your own manuals. I mean, obviously, because you put the models together. But for people that don't know, when you design a model, I mean, typically, how many iterations are there? How much test flying is there? How many revisions? I mean, just in general, how much time do you put on a model before it comes to market? And I'll start this time with Retro RC Mark.
Well, of course, it varies depending on the complexity of the model and my own personal experience with that kind of model. The very first kit that I put out, the EMOF that I mentioned earlier, first airplane lasted one flight. I built a total of 5 prototypes before it went into production. So that was a good learning experience for me. And I also spent about 3 months writing the instruction manual, which is 20 pages long and it's got 100 photographs in it roughly. That takes a lot of time putting the thought into covering everything that a novice builder who's never built this kind of airplane before will come across. Some other airplanes, like indoor rubber-powered model airplanes I do for Science Olympiad, it might take 3 prototypes. Some of the larger airplanes, particularly if they're existing designs, for example, my latest radio control kit that I've come up with is this thing called Chicken Hawk, which was designed in 1963 by Ted Schrader. This is the only one that I have built. I've got a second one I've built partials that I didn't complete to check the fit of parts together, but this is the only one that I built and flown, and it flew right off the board. Flew so well that I felt comfortable to put it right into production. So it varies.
Old school Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my experience is pretty much the same. It does vary. In most of the kits that I've done, with the exception of the Javelin and the Mambo, those were existing kits which I've modified in some way, shape, or form. So you know off the bat that they're pretty much going to fly. You pretty much know where the CG is going to be. So there's not a lot of guesswork there. As long as you get those right, it's pretty much going to fly. Now, whether you need to adjust things, from that point, you don't know. But most of my kits are at least probably 3 prototypes. There's at least the first one, to build it and fly it and make sure you're on the right path. If that's correct and you don't have to make changes, the second one you build because you now take pictures of all the steps along the way to make sure you get them right for the instructions. And normally there's a third or a fourth one. In my case, I will do sometimes 2 other ones past that point, one for electric and one for glow or gas powered. And that way I have both for when I go out to various events. So I have something that's, appropriate to fly in, whatever the setting may be. It might be an electric only event, so I take the electric, or, vice versa. So that's pretty much it. Since we're doing show and tell, bear with me a second. You guys will see this in the October issue, but this is the latest one that's going to come out. This is we call them this. Well, actually, we don't call them. Ken Willard designed these back in the day, the Sunday Fighters, and this is the British version, which I'm actually finishing up, where we fill in the pre-orders on this the end of this month. Basically, we've got a bunch of those ready to go. It's electric powered, takes a 3S pack, and it's about 4 pounds ready to go. In case of this one, there are 2 prototypes, one to test, and then one that I did all the pictures with and did the flying with, that one that you see there. So again, as Mark said, it depends on the plane. Most often I've been pretty lucky. They've worked pretty much off the bat, but there has been an occasional 1 or 2 that required 4 or 5 more steps to either fix what I didn't get right in the first place or something that you didn't see, so.
Well, so after you do, you do a great job building the aircraft and sand, as Retro RC Mark stated. Well, the next thing is to cover the airplane. To choose your covering material and choose your covering scheme. And I've always felt like an aircraft, that you're about to cover, it's like a blank canvas, right? Because you can cover it however you want, and you can go for something that's been previously, or you can design something completely new. So I'd like to hear from both of you. Firstly, where your inspiration comes from, for the most part, to, when you cover your aircraft. And then secondly, if you have any tips for covering. And so this time I'll go with you, Mark Lanterman.
The inspiration kind of comes from all sorts of points. I'm a graphic artist by trade, so I can design color schemes fairly easy. And like I said, I've been in the industry for a while, so I kind of used to that sort of thing. But some of my designs, I actually mimic what was done before. Some of them I make up my own. Actually, one thing that I do to help on that for our kits, on our website, for any individual kit that you look on our website, if you scroll down the page, there's a link where you can actually download a coloring page. Think of it as like an old school, color page when you were a kid, with your crayons. And it has a side view and a top view, and you can actually print that out, download it, print it out, and design your own. Print as many copies as you want until you get it right. And that's part of what we do to help that out. Be honest, the other thing that I use is something that I got, must have been from Toledo many, many years ago. I'm not sure if Great Plains owned Top Flight back then, or if they were still, still on their own. But there was a poster that they created with a bunch of color schemes on it. So like a 24 by 36 poster, and it's all top views of different airplanes, biplanes, monowings, swept wings, and that sort of stuff. And there's probably, 30 different color schemes on there, or different things. And I refer to that every once in a while for color schemes as well. And the colors I choose, I try to choose something that's pleasing. I think Mark, with some of his retro schemes, and myself are very similar. We like to not to use the bright colors as much, but some of the more vintage looks as much as we can. The only catch on mine is I am not an aficionado when it comes to silk and dope or any of those sort of things. I'm a monocoat or ultra coat guy, so I'm sort of limited on color schemes there. Everything's unfortunately a little too shiny sometimes, but that's just the way it is. But anyway, that's my view.
Okay. Just a few things to add to what Mark has said on covering. There are a whole bunch of covering materials available. My personal favorite for radio control models is Solar Text, which unfortunately is now been out of production for a couple of years. I still have enough for maybe a dozen planes of my own, but I can't sell it anymore because I can't replenish my stock. But anybody who comes to a swap meet and sees somebody has some Solar Text, I would thoroughly recommend you grab it. The Flying Wing, for example, this one is covered with Solar Text. One of the features is it's not shiny. I'm a person that doesn't like shiny airplanes, and it's not particularly heavy. I've covered maybe 10 different airplanes in Solar Text. None of them have come out overweight, and they've all survived. This particular one, first prototype, I don't know if you can see it, but right there, there's a little ding, and back up here, there's a chunk of wood sitting, which came out of that ding from flying it into a tree. This was the first prototype, still flying. Like I mentioned earlier, I have one of my emails that has 500 flights on it. It was covered in Solar Text. The oldest airplane that I have that I built in the United States is a 84-inch wingspan Sal Tabi powerhouse, which was built in 1986. It's still flying, still with its original covering, so it's very durable. Now, going back to something else Mark mentioned, tissues. This particular airplane has Izaki tissue on the wings, which has been doped with a relatively new product called Easy Dope from Dulux Materials. It's a water-based dope, so it doesn't stink like the traditional stuff. My wife loves it because she hated the original dope. It stinks. And it's not particularly difficult to do. There are lots of articles, particularly if you look at places like the National Food Flight Society's website, you'll find lots of articles on how to do things like cover with tissue. Also, the wing on the Lulu glider, it's also a doped product, but it's not tissue. It's a synthetic product called polyspan, which is really a polyester tissue, which you stick on like normal tissue with either a tissue paste or use your dope as an adhesive. Then you heat shrink it, and then you dope it to seal it. So that's a much more durable product than tissue, but still laborious to put on because you've got to put multiple coats of finishing on. I personally prefer products like that rather than the shiny iron-on plastics. But anyway, lots of different products available. Experiment with them, see what works for you. Color scheme, I asked my wife. She's got a much better eye for color than I do, and she hates red and yellow airplanes, so I don't get to do too many red and yellow airplanes. But do consider whenever you're putting an airplane, it's easier to see a yellow airplane, a red airplane, an orange airplane, a blue and white airplane like the little biplane that I've just come out with is not so easy to see on a nice, bright, sunny day with nice white puffy clouds. It kind of tends to disappear when it's any distance away from you and flying away or towards you.
So does this one. When we were doing the video on it, it disappeared into the trees several times. So you do have to be careful. Good point.
Right.
Well, I think that's all great feedback. And I want to inquire, I know we touched on it a little bit, but I want to make sure, beyond the kits, both your companies offer some other products. And so I'm going to start with Old School Model Works, Mark, and let's touch on first. You have some artwork that you offer that people can adorn their walls with. And in fact, you sent me a couple of pieces of artwork that I took pictures of and wrote about in the October issue. So anyone that reads the October issue in the Worth Closer Look section will see what we're talking about. But can you tell us a little bit more about that and other products that you offer, Mark?
Yeah, those are our aircraft profiles. They're relatively new. They're basically side views of airplanes, kind of like you see drawn out like on a artist sketch or something like that. And we simplify them a little bit, put in all the panel lines and rivets as necessary. And then we also layer them, though. You have your white foam backing, and there's what am I trying to say? A piece of paper that's basically, it's an artist's type paper. It doesn't have all the oils and stuff in it, so it's going to last a long time. We print on that a little bit about the plane at the bottom, and then we glue on the first layer of the plane, which is basically the full silhouette of the plane. But then we'll stack up a few layers on top of that for the wing or maybe the cowl or landing gear. It depends on the plane, but there's several different stacks that we can put on these, and it gives it kind of a 3D look to a standard profile airplane. It actually kind of looks pretty cool. We stain the other ones that are coming out. So you'll have the basic light ply, which is the side view, and then there'll be 2 or 3 others which are stained a darker color. So not only do they physically pop out, visually they pop out as well. And again, they have all the etched detail in there. There's probably about 20 or so. Not exactly sure how many we have, but I make more as I have time. They're relatively simple to do, about a half day's work to design one. And they've been very popular. And as far as the other stuff we have, most of the other stuff are craft-related items. Some light shades, which are kind of an Art Deco thing. I make keychains and so many other things I can't remember right now. Covers for tissue boxes. We make some various smaller toy kits. Actually, one of the latest things, actually, it's in the background right there. That's our racecraft line of items for slot cars. There's you probably can't see them there, but if you go to our website, you can check them out. They're for 132nd and 164 scale slot cars. And they're the garage with a working door. There's billboards, Marshall stands, those sorts of things. That's something new that we're trying out. Those are all made from basswood. As you can see on the screen there, there's the earrings that we've made, again, both Art Deco and a few of the profile types for various airplanes for the wives out there. We were getting questions from, can you do this? Can you do that? And I thought, no, let's try it out and see. And I took them to a few shows, a couple of the scale events that I was doing, and the women liked them, so we expanded the line. I'd have to say there's probably 25, 30 different varieties of those, and or maybe not quite that, at least 20 or so, I'd say at least. And just a bunch of different things that we make from various, some of it's made with some of the extra that we have over from kits, and some of it's, an actual thing that we designed and made up. Like our, you'll see in the background on the right-hand side was a hanger that we made. It's a little Christmas tree ornament that's kind of modeled after one that's not available anymore. And we make ornaments which are old vintage instruments. So it's a set of 4, and they have a gold ring around them, and they look like the instruments that you had back in the 20s and 30s type of thing. And I don't know, a whole wide variety of stuff that we make, and it's all available on our website. We make it all here, laser cut it all, actually back in that room right there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And we had Mark's website address on the screen, but someone asked for your website. So can you just say what your website address is?
Oldschoolmodels.com. Everything's spelled out just regular, no fancy spellings, oldschoolmodels.com.
Awesome. All right. Now, Retro RC Mark, what do you have outside of model kits?
Well, first of all, I just want to answer a question that Gregory has asked. He's asking, do you spray Easy Dope? You can spray it, but I just brush it. You water it down, 70% water, 30% of the product, and just brush it on. Because most of it evaporates. It's the water that evaporates. It doesn't leave brush marks. So it's very easy to brush it on. You don't need to spray. So it's cleaner than spraying. It's no mess in the house. Don't have to worry about it getting all over the place. Anyway, to answer your other question, I've got a bunch of other products. Most of my other products are made from Baltic birch plywood. I have a whole bunch of glue caddies. I'll just show a couple of them. This is, I think, glue caddy number 2, which has slots for CA and for accelerator. This is number 7. There are actually 8 glue caddies, and this one is designed to hold 4 epoxies upside down so that they're ready to go, and you can put 4 epoxies on the other side that are sitting the right way up if you have different cure setting epoxies. It also comes with a little drip tray that goes in here. Unfortunately, I don't have it here with me right this second. Then I have a number of other things like this is a needle file rack, which stores a bunch of your needle files. You can see them and pick them. You're not looking through a box, try and find the one that you're looking for. It has 2 rows. You can have like larger files at the back, smaller files at the front, and put the same shape file in front of it so you know which one goes where. This little thing is for storing your various sets of pliers. Keeps your workbench tidy, makes it easy to find the tools when you're looking for them. There's also a variety of battery storage options, a couple of 3 different inserts that you can put inside the ammo cases for larger batteries. And then there's also 4 different battery boxes for storing small indoor type batteries. Yeah, they're up on the screen at the moment. They've all proven to be very popular. I see them all over the place now. People are using them. So Have a look at my website, and you'll find all of the other ancillary products that I do.
Yeah, I really wanted to make a point to point out these different products that you both have, because you do have a lot of things that are useful beyond the kits that whether it's artwork or an ornament. There we go. There's a GB Mark sharing with everyone. So there's one of the examples of the wall art. So one final question that I want to ask you both, and I'm sure I hear this a lot, and it was actually in the comments earlier. Someone made a comment, and they commented about the cost of balsa wood and the availability of balsa wood. So I'd love, for the viewers, just to hear from you, what you deal with as a manufacturer and distributor that works with balsa wood on a daily basis. So, Mark Freeland, I'll start with you.
Well, we were just talking about this before the show started. For those that don't know, the price of balsa wood has gone through the roof in the last year and a half. I was buying balsa wood for 10 years at the same price, and all of a sudden it's now 225 to 250% of what it was a year and a half ago. So if you see our prices going up, we're trying to absorb some of it, but we have to pass the bulk of the increase of the material costs onto our customers. That's the reason why our kits are going up in prices, because the balsa wood is a lot more expensive now than it used to be.
And Mark Lanterman, do you want to add anything to that?
Mark mentioned before the show, we were talking about it, and one of the things I asked about it is, are we allowed to cuss about this when we get to this particular section? We both buy wood from the same place. There's not that many places to get it from anymore anyway. And I'm having the same price increases that he has, that BMJR has, that, let's face it, Balsa USA, SIG, everybody's had these. The reason for it, as I understand it, is balsa is not only used in our industry as it always has been, and a few others, but with the advent of wind turbines, the big turbines that you see on the side of the road, the great big giant things, apparently the majority of what's used in those blades is balsa wood. And so a lot of it's being snapped up to be built on those. So whether or not that's true, I don't know. I've never looked inside one, but that seems to be where some of it's going. But yeah, the prices are crazy. And we had a price increase back in March. Hopefully I don't have to have another one again anytime soon. But again, to Mark's point, we absorb what we can, but we do have to make a profit. We try not to gouge anyone on anything, but it's kind of like playing the stock market at the moment, how much the balsa will be on any given day. And the plywood, spruce, basswood, the other things are fine. It's just balsa is gone through the roof.
Well, I'm actually considering working on a kit that doesn't use any balsa wood, all pine and spruce, maybe some basswood. But we'll see.
Well, I really appreciate you both coming on the show, and all the insight that you provided on building, and hopefully the October issue and build month and the plan sales and the reviews, it'll really get people excited about building. I mean, obviously this time of year people are starting to think about build projects, especially if you live somewhere maybe that gets really cold or a lot of snow. So when I'm from Florida originally, so we didn't really have a build season per se, but I instituted about 10 years ago to make the October issue the build issue, because I wanted to give away free digital plans and promote building and give discounts to our plan service when people are thinking about projects. So I really appreciate you both coming on. I appreciate all that you do for the hobby, and I want to close on a really quick an interesting piece of trivia that I meant to mention earlier. So when I talked early at the very beginning of the show, before both of you came on and joined me, I mentioned just really quick about Fender guitars and how they were having record sales, and I mentioned specifically about the precision bass and that I had purchased one. And what I meant to share with everyone was, as an interesting piece of trivia, there is a Fender precision bass in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio, that actually belonged to one of our members, who is still a member, and that gentleman is Peter Albin. And if you don't recognize his name, he is the bass player for Big Brother and the Holding Company, and that band was Janis Joplin's band. So Peter Albin, who is a free flighter and current member, he was on stage with like Jimi Hendrix and the Who and Janis Joplin, and his band, Big Brother and the Holding Company, still performs to this day. And so I just thought it was an interesting piece of trivia to end out today's show about Peter. And I featured him in a I Am the AMA on the back page a couple of years ago. So if anybody wants to look back, I don't have the actual issue right off the top of my head, but he actually did an interview, and he's very active in Free Flight. So kind of a neat little piece of trivia. Again, thank you, both of you Marks, for coming on today and answering questions and answering viewers' questions. And be sure to check out both of their websites. Can both of you just give your websites one last time, please?
www.retrorc.us.com.
And mine is www.oldschoolmodels.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody for watching. And the next show will be October 16th, Friday, October 16th. So I look forward to talking to more guests, and I hope everybody can tune in. So thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay.